Remember back in the start of this series when we headed off to the shops with just £1? Let's do that again today. So back when I made my first budget challenge video, as they were then called, I headed off to the shops with £1 and my objective was to make 3 meals with the shopping that I could just buy for that £1. That was a number of years ago, and food inflation has been quite significant in the interim. I'm getting a lot of comments from people saying, I bet you couldn't do that today in 2025. I kind of agree. I bet I couldn't. But let's head off to the shops with £1 and see if I can make maybe 1 meal for £1. We're going to need some rules and parameters, but there won't be many because too many rules makes rules lawyers. So I'm just going to see what I can make with the shopping I can get for £1. Full use of kitchen facilities as usual. Water, salt, pepper, 1 herb, 1 spice, 1 sauce.
He is the one.
1 tablespoon of fat or oil, and 1 foraged item. As always, this is an exercise to try to provoke a creative response to a problem that is today, for me, artificial. This is not supposed to be a prescription for people who are short of cash. It's also not supposed to be completely realistic because I've got a roof over my head, I've got no medical bills, I've got shoes on my feet, and my children are all grown up and flown the nest. So there's a lot of things for me that are easier than they are for other people. Let's go shopping. Now, some people do question why I take a trolley for a £1 shop. One reason, obviously, is that one of my hands is occupied by a camera. But also, sometimes when I'm doing these shops for these videos, I do other shopping that we happen to need as well. I did look in the reduced section. There's quite a lot of reduced vegetables here, but not an awful lot that will fit our £1 budget. For example, mushrooms, £1.58 after reduction. There were some parsnips which were reduced down to 25p, so that's a possibility because it's a nice big bag, but I left it for now. There was also a reduced section for chilled foods, but nothing at all in here that would fit the budget, and also some things that weren't reduced even though they were here. I presume somebody's going to come along and label them in a minute. Or it could be something that somebody's dumped there when they've taken a reduced item that was the same as the thing they wanted. Lots of tinned things that will fit in the budget. So we've got tinned kidney beans and chickpeas. We've got tinned tomatoes that would fit in the budget. Spaghetti. 500 grams of straight spaghetti for 28p is a possibility. I was going to do this thing where I did spaghetti and sardines and something else, but there were no cheap sardines in this shop. We've got rice as a possibility. Various other things. We've got, of course, baked beans, always a possibility. 25p for a can of baked beans. That has gone up since the beginning of this series, but not as much as other things. And there was a reduced bakery section as well, where there were some things that might have worked. So this loaf of nice seedy wholemeal bread. It's only a small loaf, but that was reduced down to 50p. That might have worked. Or actually, if we want a slightly less fancy loaf, there's this one, just wholemeal for 45p. In the frozen section, there was only really one thing that was less than my £1 budget, which was this bag of mixed vegetables for 99p. That would leave me only with a penny, which isn't much use. 35p for the cheapest instant noodles. But there's this pack of savoury rice for 28p. Now this one's got a possibility because it's not only got some sustenance in there, it's got flavourings. 49p is the price now for the fish paste and meat pastes. And there's this cheap tin of tuna, 55p. I think it's only cheap because they're in a price war with another supermarket. There were only a few vegetables that were available loose. Everything else is in pre-weighed bags. So it was carrots, parsnips, onions, and I think probably broccoli. I could have snapped off a stalk of broccoli and weighed that. So I decided to get some red onions. Red onions were a little bit cheaper than the white onions, but it was a bit tricky finding one that fit the money I had left, but I did it in the end. So here is the haul. A tin of tuna chunks in brine, drained weight 102 grams, dolphin friendly. Tuna chunks, 55p. A pack of golden vegetable savoury rice, so tasty long grain rice tossed with vegetables, 120 grams. I imagine this probably is supposed to serve 2 people. Yeah, half a pack is a serving. Serving suggestion is put it in a bowl, don't just eat it off the floor. That was 28p. Leaving me 17p in the budget, which I managed to get 2 red onions. Quite difficult to actually find 2 red onions that would come to 17p. They were all about the same size, and I couldn't find one big onion that was going to be 17p, and I kept finding 2 smaller ones that came to 18p, but I got there in the end. 17p for 2 red onions. That's all I've got from the haul, so I've got to forage something and then make this into some kind of a meal. I mean, it's pretty obvious it's going to be just rice and tuna and something. There's not really an awful lot of scope for creative cookery here. Anyway, let's see what happens when we put this together. So this is what we got to work with today, and I've got to just go and do some foraging. But before I do, let's just discuss what the other options might have looked like. So this is actually for 28p, quite a small packet of rice when you consider I could have bought a whole kilo of rice for 49p. But in these budget challenge things, there's always a competition between 4 main factors, which is sustenance, nutrition, flavour and variety. And these 4 things, you can never really cover them all. So for example, I could have bought that 49p bag of rice, but that's half the budget gone. And where's the flavour and the other nutrition coming from? Lots of sustenance in rice, but not much vitamins and protein and all the kind of nutrition, the wider nutrition angle. Likewise, could have bought that packet of 28p pasta instead of this. But again, where's the flavour coming from? Because this has got, whilst it's not an awful lot of food in there, has got vegetables and it's got stock powder in there. It's got the flavourings and spices in there already. And so these 4 factors are always competing with each other when the budget is tight. So I could have bought that 50p loaf of bread or the 45p loaf of bread and 2 tins of beans, and we could have just had beans on toast all day. That probably would have been a better option for covering nutrition and sustenance, but with no variety. Or I could have got the 45p loaf of bread and this 55p tin of tuna, and we could have had some nice tuna sandwiches with my sauce allowance, which I suppose would be mayonnaise. But again, sustenance and nutrition nicely covered, flavour more or less covered, variety is just not there. So it's always difficult to try to balance those things. And most of the time, I'm looking for the number of items I can get, the number of different items I can get. And so getting these 3 items here was better than getting just 2 or 1 item, especially as this one's got loads of stuff in there already notionally, although I don't suppose it's going to look exactly like that. Anyway, I'm going to head out now, do a tiny bit of foraging. So in terms of foraging options, we really are spoiled for choice at the moment. There's tons of stinging nettles and ground elder in our own little bit of woodland. Looking further afield though, there's lots more nettles. This is cow parsley, that's another thing we could have. Stinging nettles though, very delicious, also really nutritious. These are hop shoots. This is the shoots of the hop vine, the same hops that are used for flavouring and preserving beer, but the hop shoots can be picked when they're this young and steamed a bit like asparagus. Corn salad here, so you might have seen that in salad mixes in the supermarket. And this is sorrel, which is a really tasty, sort of slightly acidic little herb. I'm not going to pick this one, and I probably wouldn't recommend this one for foraging newbies, because look at these leaves. They've got the same shape as the leaves of wild arum, which is really quite toxic and dangerous. They're just a little bit too similar, so if you're a newbie forager, I maybe wouldn't recommend this one. Here's actually sorrel growing right next to wild arum, and you can see how similar the leaves are. Dandelions, of course. Dandelion flowers are edible and they're really quite good, but better probably breaded and deep fried. Broadleaf dock is another one. You can eat the leaves here. And I have the option for 4 different species of wild onion. Here, 3-cornered leek. These are rosy flowered garlic, which later on will produce aerial bulbils, which are really quite good. This is crow garlic, which is a bit like chives. And ramsons, very familiar wild garlic. But I've already got onions in the shopping, so what I've actually decided to pick is hogweed. Now this is common hogweed, not giant hogweed. Giant hogweed is dangerous and toxic. Common hogweed is not, and it's just these young asparagus-like shoots that I'm going to pick. Foraging is done. I've got some lovely hogweed shoots, so just need to choose spice, herb, sauce, fat. So my spice is going to be curry powder. Technically more than one spice, but it's a spice in the spice cupboard. My sauce is going to be mustard. My herb is going to be some fresh fennel from the herb patch in the garden. And my fat is going to be a tablespoonful of butter. Right, let's get cooking. So for this rice, I'm just going to follow the instructions on the packet, which is add it to a pan with 425 ml of water, and then bring it to the boil and simmer. Lid on, we'll bring that to the boil, simmer it until it's absorbed. For the rest of this, I'm going to try to create the illusion of variety by doing 2 different things with the onions. I'm going to fry some until they're caramelized, but I'm going to reserve some and put them in nearly raw. 1.5 of my onions is going to go in and be fried in butter. In fact, what I'll do, I'm going to dice this onion piece here small, and then I'm going to cut this one into little crescents. So we've got some variety of texture as well. There we go. The illusion of variety. So that bit of onion there is going to go in the pan with about probably half of the butter. That rice is now come to a boil. Just going to give it 1 stir just to make sure nothing's sticking on the bottom. And we're now just going to simmer that for 20 minutes per the directions on the pack. In this pan, butter. And 3/4 of the onions. Reserving half an onion, 1/4 of the total. So I'm just frying these onions over a medium heat, stirring regularly, just to get some nice caramelization going in there. You can see they're already starting to brown quite nicely. My hogweed stems, or hogweed shoots rather, which have had a lovely wash, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do something here to create the illusion of variety. So I'm lining these all up with the leafy bits in line there. And then this part here, I'm going to dice. And that's going to go in with the onions. I'm going to have like a heaped teaspoonful of curry powder. I'm I'm just going to move that around, let that toast a little bit, let that fry a little bit in the oil, just to bring the spices to life. We're going to have about a level teaspoonful of whole grain mustard. And then before that starts to burn, we're going to have about half a cup of water. No, about a quarter of a cup of water. Turn the heat down now. I'm just going to let that reduce until it's the right kind of thickness, and then it'll come off the heat. And then in preparation for finishing that sauce, this remaining piece of onion, I'm going to coarsely dice. Break it up into little squares. And also, I think probably not too much of this fennel, because it is quite potent a flavour. It's got a strong kind of aniseedy flavour. I have another little bit of the leafy bit off of there, the fuzzy bit. Right, let's just go back and check on that sauce. So yeah, in with the fennel and the onion, the raw onion. Right, so that's just going to get combined like that, and then that's coming off the heat now. Not going to get any further cooking. So we have got some raw onion in there, as well as the caramelised onion. Right, this tin of tuna, which is in brine, not oil. Now, oil would have been quite an interesting thing, because fat is always in short supply on these challenges, but this is just salted water. I'm not going to tip that away because I have an idea. My remaining little bit of butter is going to go in there. The sort of leafy bits of my hogweed shoots, making sure they all get contact with the pan. All right, now I'm going to steam them the rest of the way using, well, I suppose we're poaching here. So that's just the brine from the tuna, which of course is more than just salt water. It is salt water with the savoury flavour of tuna cooked into it because of the cooking process that happens inside the can. Right, rice is coming off the heat now because that's done. That hogweed is now cooked. Let's have a little taste and see if I've made any kind of sensible decisions here. Oh, that's really good. Obviously I've had steamed hogweed before, but I've never had it poached in tuna brine before. But that's really surprisingly good. The tuna itself, that is the drained contents of the can. Weird looking tuna. Anyway, that I'm going to put in with the rice and mix it through without breaking it up too much. I'll leave it in chunks like that. Time to plate up whatever this is. Okay, well, I think that's weird, but let's get it to the table and give it a taste. So, like I say, that's weird, and I don't know if it's weird in a good way or a bad way. Well, let's just try a few things on their own. So the tuna with the rice, I'm fairly sure the tuna together with the rice is going to be just fine. I mean, I'm going to say, I think if you're going to mix fish in with rice, I think sardines work better than tuna, but it's okay. This onion sort of curry with the rice. Yeah. Oh, and you can really taste the fennel. The fennel just adds a layer of lovely sweetness on top. If we try and get a bit of everything, it's weird. It's definitely weird. It's a really unusual set of flavours here. And I'm not very sure how much of my enjoyment here is coming from the fact that I quite enjoy weird stuff. I quite enjoy trying things which are unusual or, you know, alien to me. The onion curry thing, some raisins in there would have been fantastic, or some other kind of fruit. Of course, the double onions thing, the cooked onions and the raw onions, is an idea that I stole from a type of curry called dubiaza. Of course, this is not that, but that's where I stole the idea from. And it definitely works. And the hogweed shoots, they are just a really, really good wild spring vegetable. One of the few wild spring vegetables, in fact, that's got a bit of a crunch and a bit of texture and a bit of body to it. And there was a little bit more than what I served up here, actually, this is about 2/3 of it. So I think that could have been stretched to 2 plates. Anyway, I think it's time to go back to Studio Shrimp now for the scores and lessons learned and maybe some other wittering.
Okay, there's only one dish to rate today, my weird onion curry thing with tuna rice. Honestly, it was not bad at all. The curried onions would have benefited from a few more ingredients. I think raisins. The tuna and rice on its own would have been just fine. And hogweed is a really superb spring vegetable. And poaching it in that savoury brine from the tuna, which was fortunately not too salty, certainly elevated it into a nice little side vegetable dish. I'm not altogether sure, though, that these 3 different things really go perfectly together. And for that reason, I think it's only a 6 out of 10. Lessons learned. The illusion of variety thing was an interesting idea, and I think we could probably have extended this further by maybe taking out 1/3 of that onion curry, blending it down to a smooth paste, and adding it back in to thicken the sauce and add body. Not adding ingredients, just using the same ingredients in a variety of different ways in the same dish. It goes without saying that the world has changed since I started this series 5 or so years ago, when it was just about possible to buy 7 or 8 different ingredients for £1, and a variety of ingredients like that makes it possible to create multiple different dishes from them. I mean, maybe I could have made a soup here from the hogweed, some of the onion and the tuna broth, so perhaps that was a missed opportunity. But for sure, everyone who said the £1 per day challenge is impossible in 2025 is pretty nearly right. There was not enough nutrition and sustenance here for a day. Numbers are on the screen. And it is possible to get more sustenance for £1 than I got here, but it's really not feasible to make a variety of different meals on that £1 budget. I did also look at options in a different supermarket, Lidl. The earlier shopping was in Tesco, but we really ran into the thing that is the same reason the video series had to evolve beyond a simple, limited budget. The very cheapest things are always the same cheapest things, and there are only so many ways you can combine baked beans, carrots, sardines and onions. In Lidl, I could have bought these 3 items, a tin of sardines, a pack of spaghetti and a tin of spaghetti hoops in tomato sauce, and I would have had a few pence change. But I'm choosing not to attempt to make a meal from those 3 items, and I'm thankful that that's a choice I'm privileged to have. My genuine sympathy, respect and admiration goes out to anyone who's routinely facing that kind of real-world hardship daily. And just a final thought on that particular note. When this video series went away from a fixed monetary budget a year or 2 back, there were people who said I should have just stuck to the budget and tried harder. And I can't help wondering what try harder really means in that context. And indeed, also for people in genuine financial hardship, who I know for sure often get given glib advice to just try harder. But standing there in the supermarket with my £1 coin, there isn't any force I can exert. There isn't anything I can push on or strain against that will somehow make the numbers on the shelf edge turn into smaller numbers, or make my pound coin worth more than 100 pennies. It's just not useful to tell people to try harder to change a thing they're powerless to affect. Anyway, I hope this has been interesting. This series will continue in some form as long as I can think of stretch-achievable challenge formats, but it pretty obviously won't be £1 for one day because sadly that's no longer viable. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.